Wonderful. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. Our guest this morning is Felicity and guest and Xoliswa Mtulu Dotwana. My name is Mohammed Abduroaf. I'm a practicing advocate in Cape Town, and I will give the video over to Felicity to introduce herself. Felicity, please.
I am a activist in the protection of women and children, focusing on maintenance and financial abuse, particularly post-relationship, and founded child maintenance difficulties in South Africa 6 years ago.
So Felicity, if I remember correctly, you yourself are how can I explain to you now, administrator of a huge group on Facebook that has over 50,000 members on it. Am I correct?
Over 60,000, yes.
Okay, that's quite a huge group. Okay, Felicity, thank you for that. I think while we wait for Lisa to come on board over here, we need to just maybe explain to the listeners the issues that various people have, or challenges they have when it comes to child maintenance, and also the cultural impact which it has as well. Would you maybe want to elaborate upon that based on your experience, the people on your group, the problems you have inquired from members of your group?
Sure. So I think that there is a general culture of not complying with financial obligations towards the children, because somewhere, somehow, there is a perception that the money is for the mother, or that she will use the money that is sent for the child. And that seems to be across the board. And I'm quite a logical person, and I just fail to understand, because for the average person, the maintenance is really quite minimal, and in most cases it doesn't cover all the expenses. And the primary caregiver, who is predominantly the mother, ends up carrying the bulk of the financial burden, plus the bulk, if not all, paid labor. So it's a culture that I really think we have to speak more about and change it, because the people the ones that suffer are the children, because their basic needs are not always being met. And we are seeing that now during COVID, where yes, a lot of people have lost their jobs, but there are also a lot of people just taking advantage of the situation right now, and not paying and not having access to courts. So I really think that while we advocate for the enforcement of the orders, that we really have to start looking at society and shifting those beliefs and misconceptions, so that the process of looking after children is not that challenging.
No, I agree with you 100%. So if I look at our topic, does culture and tradition impact on maintenance and co-parenting? I can really see, and I've experienced in the past, especially when it comes to culture and of various, religions, races, denominations, etc. There are some cultures that believes that they follow the patriarchal system, or where the male is in charge, and whatever the male says is law and rules. So for argument's sake, if a couple should break up, then automatically it's assumed that the child or the children should automatically go to the father, and the father will be the one that will say, when the mother can have contact with the child, when the mother can form part of the child's life, etc. So that could be a potential cultural problem we could have. I see Xoliswa is now back online over here, and maybe she can elaborate upon that. But Felicity, have you experienced such problems whereby you're dealing with a male patriarchy issue, where the men believe because they are men, they are entitled to certain rights and entitled to certain type of, authority over the ex-spouse, the ex-girlfriend, and so on? What's your view on that?
Okay, so I can't see Xoliswa yet, but while we're waiting for her, is in preparing for today, I mean, I'm a lot more familiar with the African kind of cultures, because it's expressed quite often on the group. But interesting, in my research that came up with the Hindu marriages and Jewish marriages. So I haven't managed to get any clarification on Jewish marriage. It appears to be religious marriages that are not recognized. So you can elaborate on Muslim religious marriages, because there was that precedent in the High Court, or that ruling in the High Court. But Hindu marriages seem to not be included in that. So I'm not going to talk about the Jewish religious marriages, because I don't have much information on that. But so with the Hindu marriages, what I'm hearing is that if they don't register it as a civil marriage, that the woman is left incredibly, and the children are left incredibly vulnerable, because it's also quite a patriarchal society or culture. And the information I got from one mom who's been through this twice is that there seems to, if there isn't a male sibling or a male child, then there is less willingness to actually pay child support, because the boy's child has more recognition because he passes on the family lineage. And she speaks of her experience in within the culture, going to court, because it's shamed upon in their community and in their families to actually force somebody through a court process. So like post-relationship or post-marriage, religious marriage, they're unable to get a spousal maintenance, because a lot of them don't work because they are home carers. And so they can't get spousal maintenance, and then they're discouraged from going to the maintenance court. And then when I went further in the conversation, and she was also saying that with the co-parenting, because there's also a reluctance to get a parenting plan in place. So the father just, if it's a boy's child, then it's absolutely fine. He apparently puts quite a lot of effort into a relationship with a boy child, but if it's girl children, then not so much. And they pop in and out without a formal arrangement in place, and often the husband takes on other wives, and the woman seems to be quite stuck in this. But I think at a later stage it would be a good idea to get maybe a legal person or an activist who is a lot more knowledgeable in this, because I really believe that we need to start talking about these things.
No, I agree with you 100%, Felicity. I think we have Xoliswa on the video. Xoliswa, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Sorry for the tech glitches initially, but I eventually got myself sorted.
No, that's all in order. No, I think we have a problem with load shedding as well, so I'm glad there won't be any load shedding on my side. Xoliswa, we introduced you as a candidate legal practitioner. Could you maybe elaborate further if you wish? And secondly, maybe open up the topic regarding does culture and tradition impact on maintenance and co-parenting? The camera's on you, Xoliswa.
No, absolutely. I think the topic is an incredibly important one, and we tend to speak about it in a by the way manner, or not in a formal manner where everybody gets to know what's going on, because people will know what is in terms of culture, or others will know what is in terms of the law. It's rare that people will actually know both unless you are, you're familiar with the culture and you have a legal background. And one might find that if you look at both, there aren't really, differences. They appear different, but from having looked at it, I have found that with the laws that are there in terms of maintenance, there's actually a basis in our culture, albeit transformed or updated, but the basis is there. And there are a number of instances where, I can bring that up. I don't know if you want me to do that now or as the conversation goes on, but it's very informative and a little bit surprising that there is actually basis in culture for some of the laws that we have, even though people may not think the same if they don't know.
No, so Leslie, you have to learn from you. So please elaborate on that. We have
Okay,
some
for
time.
instance, I mean, if we're talking about culture in maintenance, I'm going to speak specifically Black and Xhosa culture in particular. A lot of our culture is based on pride as a people and pride in practices. An example that I'm going to bring in is, for instance, we speak of, for instance, I don't know if everyone is aware that when the father of I'm talking about unmarried couples now, when the father refuses, or is unable to pay maintenance for whatever reason, and say the mother is just not winning in terms of courts, the person can actually approach the court to have an order of maintenance against their father's parents. This is a very contentious subject, especially with us Black people and particularly Xhosa people. I won't want to speak on behalf of others because there are a lot of things that will say, now, why are you wanting to go sue the grandparents or the poor old people who were not there when you made the baby, and a lot of things like that. And on some level, that is true. Now, that's what the law says. The law gives you that right. You have that recourse to go, approach the courts for an order for parents to maintain or do what their son will not do. Culturally speaking, it's not so different. In the olden days, or according to our culture, which is a little bit watered down now, but maybe not watered down, but updated, so to speak. Back in the day, a person who has impregnated an unmarried person, there is a difference. I know Felicity mentioned damages. There is a concept of paying damages. Now, the damages are paid to the parents. I'm even loath to use the word paid because it's not like you're purchasing something. You're not buying anything. It is just, a cultural practice. Way back then, it used to be, cows on 4 feet. And you pay the damages, whatever it would be, however many cows the family asked for. I'm not certain if there was a specific. There's a lot of variance with different, sections or tribes, or, we call it iziduko in Xhosa. So the parents would demand that from the person. And this, we need to make clear, a person paying damages is not paying for any rights towards the child. It's not towards maintenance of the child. This goes to the parents for having wronged them and having their unmarried child pregnant. Okay, so it has nothing to do with the child. However, when the child is born, the unmarried father is then required to pay isondlo. That's rudely interpreted is it's feeding the child, and that would be another cow. And initially that would be, they milk the cow and then the child is fed. Then that is that's acknowledging the child is yours. The child's customary practices can be, performed at your house, because you never, in as much as you pay in as much as you've paid damages and you've paid isondlo, that doesn't give you any rights to the child. The child belongs to the family of the mother. The child will be raised by the family of the mother. The child will always belong to the family of the mother. However, if there are any traditional practices or cultural practices that have to happen and that need to be done or performed in the father's side of the family, then you having done that gives you the right to have those performed in the side of the family. Now back to the maintenance moving forward to today. Now, if you didn't maintain then, or you didn't pay isondlo, the family, the girl's family or the woman's family, has the right to approach the chief to state their case that our child, I'm going to say child because in our culture, if you're unmarried, you're a child. You could be 25, you're still a child. So you impregnated our child, and there is nothing there's no help coming from your side in raising this child. So the chief has the right to actually approach the parents of the man, the parents of the father, and say, this is what has happened. Your child has done that. Again, I'm using the word child very loosely because we're talking about adults here. Your child has impregnated this child, and then the duty falls, if your child is not maintaining, the duty falls on you as the parents to do this. So you will see that the laws that we have in maintenance that give you the right to go, seek maintenance from the parents, it's not something that was never ever done. The difference, one could say, is in terms of enforcement. The law will have a court order, they can enforce it. Traditionally, it's not as as rigid or as harsh as that, even though there is recourse for the chief, because there are a lot of other practices. If you're saying, for instance, if the father's saying, I'm not maintaining because it's not my child, and the parents would be of the same view, that's not our child. There are other things that are done traditionally to try and seek clarity in terms of who's, if the father genuinely is the baby. I don't think they were as scientific as we have it now, because now we have, you'll have DNA tests. There were no DNA tests then, but there were things that are done to try and establish the parentage or the fatherhood of the baby. So if that's established, then the parents have to maintain the child. But like I said previously or initially, a lot of things that we do with the Black and particularly Xhosa culture are based on pride. A lot of families would not want it to get to that state. They would not be refusing. If they do, it's a community thing. If they do, then there are steps, we know what needs to be done. So there was that. There's not so much of a difference. It's just the enforcement of what it is. But the other difference is, as I'm saying, you do not have any rights to the child. You can see your child, you're not denied anything. But the child is just, it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you or your family. It belongs to the mother's family. With the law, you have equal rights to the child. And if you are, another thing that I must actually mention, we have a lot of instances where we will have, say for instance, the lady is saying, you never paid damages, therefore you never pay damages, or you're not paying maintenance. Traditionally, you have no rights to the child. It is unfortunate because if you go today, if you approach the courts, you cannot be told you don't have any rights to the child. We both know that maintenance and sharing custodianship of the child has not, those two are two separate things. Traditionally, we say you don't have rights to the child. However, if now you can approach the courts, whether you're paying maintenance or not. You cannot say to a father, you're not paying maintenance, or you have not paid isondlo, you have not paid damages, therefore you have no rights to the child. You have rights to the child. You approach the courts, and you will never be denied rights to the child. I think that would be, the difference, the little bit of the difference between the two. I don't know, I've kind of lost video here. I don't know about audio.
We can see you.
No,
we can see you.
Oh, okay.
And we can hear you.
So, but what's important now for people who still, a lot of us, even in the modern era, and even in, as educated as we may be, our culture is still a very important part of our lives. And it wouldn't be uncommon for a person, however educated, however modern they live their lives, to say, no, you haven't paid damages. This is not going to happen. But you can't do it like that. We can't, it is cultural. I think that's where the slight difference would be, because you cannot, obviously, you can't bar a man from seeing or a father from having access to his child, when you know, that would be the main thing, I think, today, that do you get access to the child, or what's your recourse?
I mean, I see it very often on the group that, and on my one-on-one conversations with women, particularly single moms, where they say that their parents are not allowing them to go to court, particularly for maintenance, because it will bring shame, and our pride, we don't beg them to contribute. And if you do, we will no longer support you and your child.
Absolutely. That's why. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It's I mean, my response is, well, this is your recourse and you need to make the decision, because you know, we also know that, and sometimes that we have to go the court process, you know, and not all. What happens when the mother's parents die, and she's left without that kind of support? So it's very complex, and you know, we have to be mindful of people's cultures, because, as you say, it's part of our whole community. But it definitely seems to, with women finding their voices particularly, and it seems to be coming up as quite a conflicting situation for them to deal with, and decisions to make.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Felicity. But you have to remember, it is one thing to make the choice about something. I mean, for instance, to use your example, you're saying the parents would say, no ways, you're not going to court, you're bringing shame to the family. That's why I actually even at the very onset and said a lot of what we do is based on pride, cultural pride. And you see that coming through in exactly the statement you've just said. And you have a decision. The recourse is there. It is your decision whether you are going to listen to what your parents are saying. You have that option, but you also have the option of seeking, you know, of going the legal route. That is your personal decision that nobody can actually, you know, say this is what you do. But the great thing is you have the option. Some do not want to, you don't have to listen to your parents. You don't have to go the legal route. So it's a very much a personal decision. Nobody can say you don't, but the very good thing about that is the option is there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this definitely needs to be discussed in more detail. I mean, we don't have enough time to really have conversations. I think we need to be having conversations with people. So we'll explore other options of taking this further, because I think it's very, very important.
I absolutely agree.
And also to have fathers participating in this process, discussion process. So I'd love to take this further with you, Xoliswa. So Mohammed, can you just maybe just also bring in a bit of the Muslim culture?
Yeah, so in terms of the development in South African law, Muslim marriages per se are not recognized as a valid civil marriage. Of course not. Only three types of marriages are recognized as civil marriages. The normal civil marriages, you get married in court through a priest. The black marriages, and you get the same-sex marriages. So those are the three marriages that apply. So the black marriage will be the Black Administration Act, I believe, and the Civil Unions Act will be for the same-sex marriages, and the normal Marriage Act will apply to the normal civil marriages. So the reason why Muslim marriages are not categorized as valid civil marriages, because it's potentially polygamous, because you can have more than one spouse. So the South African civil marriage applies to only one spouse, one man, for the exclusion of all others. So there is a bill in place, a Muslim marriages bill that's dealing with those aspects. But from a legal point of view, a practical point of view, there doesn't seem to be any difference from where the law comes to its application. For example, a Muslim female spouse can still take a Muslim husband to the maintenance court. Children can still apply for maintenance. So they're not really necessarily seen as being born out of wedlock, although they are from a civil point of view, but from a South African legal point of view, they still have the rights as any other party would have. From a propriety point of view, where civil marriage is automatically in-community property, where Muslim marriage will be out of community property, in the sense of the husband will own his property and the wife will own her property. The challenges comes in, of course, when the husband has more than one wife, and it becomes a bit more complicated. does the Interstate Succession Act apply here? How does it apply? Because that applies more to the issue concerning having one spouse, one husband and one wife. But for all intents and purposes, if somebody asks me, the question is, what are the advantages of getting for a Muslim couple to get married civilly as well? I would say there isn't much advantages. The only issue would be there's a bit of an inconvenience because you're not registered on the civil system. You're not registered at Home Affairs. You always have to show your Islamic marriage certificate to show that you are married Islamically. But from a point of view, should the spouse pass away and you're only married in terms of Islamic rights, you will be entitled to inheritance as if you were married in terms of South African civil law.
Okay, fabulous. Yeah, I think that there seems to be an innate in all cultures that there is a sense of responsibility, whether people are together or they pass on or whatever, to collectively look after children. And that's where the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that's been disrupted in our modern society for many reasons. One, people move all over not just the country, but all over the world. But I think that we also need to introspect and really focus on the best interests of the child, because in all of these post-relationship situations, the focus seems to be on the two parents, and the children become collateral damage, and not just physically, emotionally, and psychologically as well. And I think that while, I speak about it a lot, not always in the public domain, but in my circles, about we really need to be focusing on this aspect of ourselves becoming a little bit more mature in our roles as adults and as parents, and what is expected of us, and become emotionally more mature so that we don't impact it on our children. Because if we look at the things that really concern me is the high numbers in maintenance court. And now we know, I don't know what the court role is going to look like going forward as the new normal, because it was already like 3-4 months, and now we're going to be a lot more, and there's short staffages or restrictions. And then also, we're a fatherless nation, that we need to, in terms of co-parenting, we speak a lot about the maintenance aspect, but in terms of both parents showing up and being, there for their children, because they are the example going forward. There is conflict, we don't love each other, but we've resolved it, and we're now, focusing on you so that we break this cycle. We can't keep on. It's just not sustainable. We see it coming out, manifesting in so many different aspects of our society.
Absolutely. I think in what you said, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Xoliswa. Go ahead.
With what you're saying, the thing you touched on that really resonates with me is that we are a nation of absent fathers. Keeping with the topic of culture and tradition and maintenance, what I found shocking or surprising, in trying to really figure out where we are culturally in comparison to legally. The cow that I talk of isondro, that is, given to the mother's parents for the feeding of the child. My question then becomes, okay, so what happens when the child grows and the child is not drinking milk from a cow? There's so many things that you need to do for a child. The child goes to school, there's clothes, and there's, incremental expenses as the child grows. And the answer is we cannot really look to culture and tradition as a silo, or without incorporating what happened. Because now we live in cities. Back in the day, yes, that cow might have been enough because there was no school you're going to. There were no fancy clothes or many of the other conveniences that we enjoy today. So you cannot be a stickler for culture and then say, I've paid my, my cow or isondro and that's it, I'm done. Because that's simply not the case now. There are fees to be paid, there's clothes, there are extracurricular activities that need to be contributed towards. So we need to marry the two, and we need to move with the times. And you can't have fathers also saying, no, I've done this and my duty is done. And this is closely correlated to saying, okay, the court mandated me to pay 1,000 rand. I've paid my 1,000 rand and that's it. You see to everything else. There are a lot of things that come and that are unexpected, you know, that happen when raising a child. And you might see that your portion as the person who is not living with the child is just not enough compared to what actually needs to happen. So you can't say, like in the olden days where you'd say, okay, my duty is done, there's that, I've contributed. It's the same as I would say with either, whether it's a father or a mother, because it could be the custodial parent is the father. You can't say I've paid what has been mandated and that's it, my duty is done, without even looking at what actually goes into raising that child. It may happen that 1 month I don't think it's likely to be less, but some month maybe more. And you know, we have to work together as the spouses. I know that, well, or as the parents, not necessarily spouses. That doesn't always happen, but I believe we should try as much as possible. And I'm fully aware that it may not always be possible because there are other parties may be unreasonable. That you have to, it's always what's in the best interest of the child. Less about our differences, but what's in the best interest of the child.
Lisa, before we end off, I think we've got about 4 minutes left. There is a question from one of the participants saying clarity on the law does it override all cultural beliefs. So it's a question regarding, we deal with children over here. So when you appear in the court, in the High Court, Magistrates Court, Children's Courts, the courts are not concerned about cultural beliefs and you know, your customs, etc. The court focuses on what's best for the child. So even if a culture says the father of a child born out of wedlock doesn't have to contribute to the child, the court doesn't care about that. The court says, we don't care about the culture, we still override the child's best interest.
I believe that the person who's saying that is absolutely correct. And despite being in the legal field, I am of the same opinion. There's a lot that can still be done to develop the law to be more aligned to our culture and traditions. A very good job has been done, but it's definitely, I feel, not enough. There are a lot more things that could be done. And he's correct. That's also how I personally feel, that it does feel as if the law does kind of override, you know, our cultural practices. And that there's plenty of scope for development to bring the two to alignment, because we are and we were a complete people with ways of regulating our practices, even before the laws were enacted, even before we had to, you know, to comply with the laws of, you know, of the land. We had our own laws and they worked and they served us. But the fact that we have evolved and we're no longer rural, you know, people who, as I've just explained just now with the maintenance, we've evolved, and the law needs to, you know, try and evolve with us. But I do agree with the person that the law does seem to be, we seem to be subservient. Our cultural practices and traditions seem subservient to the law, and that's not necessarily correct. That's not necessarily right. I do see a lot of room for improvement.
Thank you, Xoliswa. Xoliswa, thank you for your time, and Felicity, thank you for your time as well. Is there any
Thank you very much. Thank you
30 seconds you have, either of you, to say your final words, but you only have 30 seconds. Felicity?
I just want to say that, you know, when we live in a diverse country, and I think that it should be incumbent on all of us to learn about other people's practices, so that in our workplaces and in schools or whatever, that we are a lot more compassionate and understanding as well.
Thank you. So Xoliswa, any final words?
What I'd have to say is put aside what the law says, put aside what cultural practices say. You know what the best thing is. Let's just have the best interest of the child at heart. Let's put aside our differences, aside the law, aside and just do what you know is correct. If you don't have a conscience, develop it, work towards developing it. But you know, have what is in the best interest of the child at heart, because at the end of the day, the child never asked to be here.